Guys, welcome back to another video, and this is this is the return of this series that people have been wanting, and I have been really enjoying it. I was wanting to spread it out, and it's been a very long time, and I genuinely apologise for that, because I was wanting to do it like once every 3-4 days, but then I've been so inconsistent with YouTube the last 2 weeks, I'd say, so I really do apologise for that, and I'm going to finish the series, don't worry about that, I'm going to finish the series no matter what. This is part 4. And I just realised, because this is part 4, the Seattle Mariners build a Death Star. This is leading on from the last one when Ken Griffey sort of got his revenge on the Yankees, and that was like where it ended. And I just realised this: is this SB Nation Secret Base? Have they changed their channel name? The creation of Secret Base. Okay, so they've changed their channel. Maybe I'll look at that in my own time. Didn't even realise this. I was scared for a second, like, have I picked the wrong video or something? But this seems to be the right one, I guess. And yeah, I mean, I'm going to look into that. That's pretty cool that they changed the name. But let's give this a watch and see what other crazy stuff we're going to experience in part 4. 96 to 99. So this is like a 3-year basis for a 33-minute video. Let's check this out, man. I love this series so much. Let's see what else there is in this crazy team's history. Or this team's crazy history, sorry. Here with the funky music again. Johnson.
After taking down the Yankees, the Mariners ultimately fell to the Indians in the 1995 ALCS, 4-2, but, as always, who cares? We'll stop just long enough to note
they got their stadium sorted, so it's fine.
Junior's weird feud with Cleveland pitcher Dennis Martinez, in which the two were constantly pausing play out of nowhere to throw one another off. When Seattle was sent home after a brutal shutout loss in Game 6, Griffey was crushed, but he still found it in him to pay a visit to his opponent's locker room and congratulate Martinez. No one ever does that. Ultimately, the Mariners got what they came for. A senseless season, one in which 1,000 different things went exactly right, permanently settled the existential threat that had plagued Seattle baseball throughout its history. Now, the team of the future was graduating into the team of the present. Now that stadium funding was coming in, Mariners fans' remaining source of anxiety was the threat of Griffey leaving in free agency. For years, he'd spoken idly about someday heading for Cincinnati, where his father played for so many years, and the Reds had been talking to his agent for weeks. But ultimately, Griffey decided to sign a 4-year deal to stay in Seattle, and, unbelievably, his best years were still ahead of him. In 1996, Ken Griffey Jr. ran for President of the United States as part...
Really? I've only realised, like, recently, like, this is random as hell, this isn't really correlated to the actual video. Like, I swear, who was someone else who ran for presidency in the United States? Like, a lot of presidents have, like, been, like, sort of, they were, like, celebrities. Not all of them. Some of them were, like, not actually celebrities, but a lot of them have been, like, celebrities, and then they sort of go into it. Who was it again? The Rock? Like, recently he's sort of been coming up. That's really interesting to me. I guess it's sort of, like, someone that you want to sort of represent your country. Someone, and I mean, someone like The Rock, I mean, I'm not going to say, this is not even me saying anything like that. But I can see maybe why some people would go for someone like him because of his sort of stature, and just like in the past maybe that was the same case. So like Ken Griffey going for this, which is actually nuts. I mean, that's such an insane thing to go
part
for.
Of a promotional stunt with Nike.
Oh.
What started as a goof quickly got a lot less fun for Griffey, who was suddenly fielding political questions from beat reporters. Though he would later become perhaps the first superstar athlete to say he would gladly play alongside a gay teammate, he found himself well out of his depth in the political arena. Junior definitely had a cranky side, and it was coming out. He hated the whole thing. The merits of his candidacy are for political historians to decide, but whatever the case, it ended in September. He found that life on the campaign trail was vicious and kept him from sleeping until noon and watching Ricky Lake, forever proving the axiom that someone who's obsessed with television can never be president. On the field, the Mariners' absolute embarrassment of talent was about to get even more embarrassing. You see, in this time, the MLB draft had a pretty strange format. In even-numbered years, the worst National League team got the #1 pick, and in odd-numbered years, it went to the worst American League team. When the Mariners finished 67-95 in 1986, it wasn't the very worst record in baseball, but it was the worst record in the AL. Lucky for them, the following draft was in an odd-numbered year, allowing them, of course, to spend the top overall pick on Junior. Now, remember that 92 season when they kinda crashed and burned out of nowhere following a couple years of positive momentum? Well, here they go again. Once again, the #1 pick was waiting for him in the following odd-numbered year. Last time, they rolled the dice on a 17-year-old, and it worked out pretty well for them.
Bro.
So, they did it again.
Alex Rodriguez, here we go. See, I've seen a lot about this guy. A lot.
If you're not a baseball person, you know Alex Rodriguez as J-Lo's husband and the guy you've seen on 37,000 different CNBC shows on mute in an airport bookstore. Let's catch up on all the weird giggles you've been missing. Here he is on Closing Bell Access. Here he is on something called Squawk Alley.
Just together, right?
And here he is on Squawk Box, which is different from Squawk Alley somehow.
He's really everywhere then.
That's how we're gonna try to get. I'm still mad about that, but you.
And here he is on Mad Money.
By the way, this bag I asked for before.
And here he is on CNBC Make It.
I'm exhausted.
God, he's such a herb. I love him. As a rookie, A-Rod was a perfect mark for a legendary prankster like Griffey. Griffey was once in the habit of betting manager Lou Piniella a steak dinner that he could hit home runs in batting practice. At some point in '95, Junior hit a cold stretch, losing bet after bet. He now owed Piniella an enormous amount of beef. One day, Piniella opened his office door and found his winnings. A live, 1,200-pound cow Junior had borrowed from a nearby farmer and smuggled in. Piniella wasn't as bothered by the cow as he was by the absolutely biblical dumps it had already taken on the floor. This stunt, though, was even funnier. When A-Rod was just 18, Griffey tried to convince him that all the stars on the team were plotting to monetize their genetics by selling their sperm, even bringing in a buddy to pretend he was a doctor. Junior asked him if he wanted in, and he ended the goof once it was clear that A-Rod was actually starting to believe him. But like Griffey, A-Rod is a far more interesting person than he's typically given credit for. In this pantheon of baseball gods, the legacy of A-Rod is by far the most complicated. Right now, though, the year is 1996. A-Rod is 20 years old, and his greatness is bewildering.
So let me start by saying this. Throughout the first 49 years of the integration era, a period starting in 1947, nary a single infielder had ever whacked 90 extra base hits in a season.
Okay.
Not even anyone that played the classic slugging position of first base. Then came year 50, and in A-Rod's very first full season as a big leaguer, he racked up 91.
What?
As a shortstop in his age 20 season, which is the
So young. That is nuts. See, I knew he was an elite player, but this is something that is wild.
most stunning part of all. To be that good, that young. It goes without saying he broke all sorts of youth records. There are a million different things 96 A-Rod was the youngest player to ever do, but irrespective of what a neophyte he was, he still clobbered more baseballs than any other infielder of any age since Jimmy Fox 58 years earlier. Through the 2019 season, that remains the lone instance of a shortstop hitting 90. And in fact, let's even expand the scope a bit to all left side of infield players to even incorporate third baseman. Still atop the leaderboard.
Jesus Christ.
That brings me to Edgar Martinez. Staying on that extra base hit theme, Edgar kicked that season off, taking it to a whole nother level. Here
got a team
are
going now,
each of
man.
his first 311 at-bats of the 1996 season. That's a whole lot of baseballs given a good ride. 66 to be exact. Allow me to repeat myself. In 1996, Edgar Martinez recorded an extra base hit on 66 of his first 311 at-bats. And this was by the time the M's had played just 84 games, barely half the season. Historically, that stacks up pretty well. In the modern era, no one's even come all that close, with the 60 threshold remaining otherwise unreached. Combined with Griffey, who had a typical peak season, that gave the 96 Mariners 3 players who topped an OPS of 1,000.
Oh my
Sorta
God.
cornering the AL market of those guys and becoming the first team with such a trio since the 1929 Cubs. Oh, and all their 4th best bat did was smash 44 dingers while driving in 138 runs. With an embarrassment of riches.
They've
up and
got a
down.
real squad going now. It's crazy. Like a few years back, they were going through all those issues. I mean, they were literally having like the stadium issues, like whether they're going to be a team or not. Now this is happening. In a flip of a switch, things will
On
change.
their
man.
lineup. The 96 M's offense
Promising as
soared
hell.
to near unprecedented heights in becoming the integration era's first squad to ever produce a team-wide OPS of 850.
mad.
They also scored at least 5 runs in 107 games. If that sounds like a lot to you,
oh my god,
you'd be right. They were the first team in 46 years to have even 100 such games. A feat that remains exceedingly rare in modern times.
That is wild.
Add it all up, and they scored nearly 1,000 runs at a time when no one prior to that season had even reached 900 since the 1953 Dodgers. And yet, somehow, some way, this team found a way to miss the postseason. Sure, their pitching was lousy. Reigning Cy Young winner Randy Johnson missed 3 months in the middle of the season due to a bulging disc in his back. Returned in August with 6 appearances out of the pen, then was shut down for the season. But that's still
injuries,
quite spectacular for that lineup to spend all of October on their couch, or like drinking coffee at grunge concerts. Maybe that would have been a bit more understandable in the pre-1969 days when the entire postseason was just the World Series, or even up through a few years prior when the postseason included an LCS and thus just 2 teams from each league made it. But this was year 2 of the implementation of the LDS, thus producing 4 playoff teams per league. Somehow, it still didn't matter. Fantastic work, Ems.
How many years have we been trying to sell you on the idea that the Mariners are the future of baseball? This will be year 6, right? Come on, guys. Don't make me look stupid.
This is our year. Come on. There we go. Let's see what this one then.
These 4 first played together in 94, but the strike wiped that season out. Griffey was hurt for most of 95, Randy was hurt for most of 96, but in 97, all 4 stayed healthy for just about the entire season. A-Rod didn't quite set the world on fire like he did the year prior, but he did have a terrific season. Randy served up the best season of his career to that point, and almost won another Cy Young award. The rock-solid Edgar was one of the best hitters in baseball again. But it was Junior, the 1997 American League MVP, who found his zenith. 3 years after the strike ended his pursuit of Roger Maris's single-season home run record, he once again took a shot at the most obsessed-over record in American sports. He went yard in his first at-bat of the season.
2-2 pitch. Swung on and belted deep to right center field, and we are tied.
And did it again in his second at-bat.
Gets under this one. Does it have legs? Back to the wall is O'Neal.
Both were given up by the same David Cohn who gave up 3 dingers to Junior in the 95 ALDS.
Oh no.
Buddy, I'm sorry.
Poor guy.
Near the end of April, Junior was on pace to hit upwards of 90 home runs.
What the
Everyone
fuck?
knew that would cool down, and it did. But even as his pace slowed, he was still on track to break the record halfway through the season. And then came an excruciating 25-game stretch in which he hit just 1 home run. Like most baseball slumps, it seemed to happen for no real reason. Griffey wasn't terribly bothered because the team was winning, and he suggested that sports writers were overly obsessed with stats and charts.
Good mentality, man. Love that.
I have absolutely no idea what he's talking about. Anyway, Junior ended up with 56 homers. While he did miss the mark by 5, he still produced one of the greatest power-hitting seasons of all time. Along with Mark McGwire, who finished with 58 over in the National League, Griffey accomplished something that no one but Maris had since the outbreak of World War II.
Jesus.
I'd like to take a moment to appreciate the fact that these 4 were playing in their peak years on the same team at the same time. The argument...
Man, like, you see these names, and again, from what I remember, the Mariners didn't win they didn't ever win the championship. So, I mean, the fact that they've got these players, and they've had other players in the past and the future, and when you look at this, and like he says, they're all in their prime at this point, oh man, I can see why people sort of meme them a lot, because they should have done a lot, like, they should have had a lot more success on the field in terms of, like, trophies, etc.
Could be made that all 4 of them were the best ever to play their respective positions.
What the fuck?
Is it a winning argument? Maybe not, but bear with me for just a minute.
That's nuts. That is nuts. That he even says that.
First up, Junior. By his age 27 season, his wins above replacement stood at 59.2. better than any other center fielder of that age aside from Mickey Mantle. There's a little bit of room to debate Griffey versus Mantle if you want to. For instance, you could try and argue that Griffey was a more well-rounded baseball player and point to his fielding ability. Chart these same guys by defensive WAR, and Junior is all the way at the top, with Mantle in pretty mediocre territory. Ultimately, though, I think I have to concede that Junior, at this point in his career, is number 2. Now Edgar, whose case is much easier. The DH is
he's actually making the cases for that,
relatively
okay.
new position, and one that players often don't occupy for the majority of their careers, so his competition is a lot thinner. Among those who spent at least 60% of their careers as a DH, the only player in the same universe as Edgar in terms of WAR is David Ortiz. Edgar is clearly the best pure DH ever. Randy is a lot more difficult to assess. Okay, so here's every pitcher ever with a WAR above 50. At 103.5, Randy places in FM radio territory, puts him at 9th all time. I'm gonna ignore these guys from the dead ball era because while they were great relative to their peers on the mound at the time, they never had to face scary home run hitters. So that leaves us with Lefty Grove, Tom Seaver, Roger Clemens, and Greg Maddux, and Randy. This is extremely rickety logic because it means we're not even considering, say, Pedro Martinez or Bob Gibson or Sandy Koufax, and it fails to account for any kind of quantity versus quality considerations. We can point out that he won 5 Cy Young Awards, more than anyone but Clemens, and he's number 2 in strikeouts, behind only his buddy Nolan Ryan. I can't rank him definitively, but on the all-time greatest roster, I think we could pencil him in as our number 5 starter without sounding completely ridiculous.
Okay.
And finally, Alex Rodriguez. A-Rod actually only played his first 10 seasons at shortstop before eventually moving on to third base, so it's a little unfair to compare his WAR at shortstop to guys who spent their entire careers there. And yet, despite playing only half as many games as the leaders on this chart, and completely sweeping some of his best seasons off the table, A-Rod shows up as one of the all-time best. There are some notable absences from this chart: Ernie Banks, Robin Yount, and Cal Ripken. Shortstops who, like A-Rod,
After
moved
playing half the
to
game.
different positions midway through their careers. So let's stack those guys up. Yep. At shortstop, I'm going with A-Rod every time.
Fuck
If
me.
you're not mad at me, you should be. This entire argument requires a fair amount of goalpost moving and cherry picking.
So they got
Are all
they
4
got a
the greatest of all
squad now.
time at their
They got a
respective positions?
squad.
No, but you could make the argument without being immediately laughed out of the room, right? For one of your players to be in that
I love
conversation
this
is
so
great.
much.
2 is practically unheard of. 3 is a ridiculous notion. And 4 is this: the 1990s Mariners,
My
the
God.
modern Murderers Row.
Murderers Row, is that what they're known as? This is such a sick series, man. So fucking sick.
Because this is an unfair semblance of talent, the Mariners had, a few months prior, traded away another player who could have eventually joined this pantheon.
God damn.
The year prior, the team was dragged to Appleton, Wisconsin for an exhibition game against their minor league affiliate, the Timber Rattlers. When the game was rained out, the teams decided to hold a home run derby to at least give the fans something to look at. Junior hit a few out, and so did A-Rod. But both of them were upstaged by the Timber Rattlers' 20-year-old first baseman. His
20
name
as
was
well.
David Arias, and according to a couple of accounts, he hit multiple home runs not just out of the stadium, but onto the highway.
What the
That
fuck?
is 650 feet away. That couldn't possibly be true.
50 feet.
It's what they said. Junior was watching in disbelief.
Fuck me.
A-Rod was freaking out. He'd later say that night, he wanted the Mariners to call Arias up on the spot. Ultimately, Arias was traded away a couple months later, and he started going by a different name. You know him as David Ortiz.
Okay,
Well-
so that's him then. Wow, they missed out. It's crazy they changed his name. I guess maybe it's to do with like a nickname or something.
All this was going on, they had one of the greatest power hitters of the 21st century
Ortiz,
just
though.
kind of hanging out in their minor league system. You see what I mean?
man.
It was as though divine intervention was feeding transcendent baseball talent into Seattle. Did I mention they still had Jay Buhner, who hit 40 home runs again? And that his 40th home run was a 484-foot annihilation in
Oh
the
my
upper deck?
God.
And belted one for history.
Look at that.
And that this home run officially gave the 1997 Mariners the all-time record for most home runs by a Major League Baseball team, a record that stood for 21 years throughout the entire remainder of the steroid era, and that they had Paul Sorrento, who hit 31 home runs, And Jose Cruz Jr., who hit 26 dingers in just 104 games, nearly won Rookie of the Year, and was traded away mid-season because they didn't need any more hitting.
Gee, they had a bloody insane team.
It was true. The Seattle Mariners really were the team of the future.
Future, yeah. Oh no. Oh, for fuck's sake. Why as soon as I say that? As soon as I'm saying it, they're like, oh, nah, let's take that away. Orioles advance past the Mariners. Oh, for fuck's sake.
In a first-round series that honestly isn't even really worth getting into, the Mariners' bats stopped working, the bullpen fell apart, and they were brushed aside by the Orioles in 4 games.
Oh, man.
To those of us who grew up in this time rooting for teams far away from Seattle, the Mariners were sort of our second favorite team, our vacation team, for all the reasons we've talked about. We wanted this team in the World Series so badly, just for the privilege of watching them. And if these Mariners weren't good enough, when was it ever going to happen? I remember thinking, well, maybe it's time to root for the individual now. Maybe things like the home run record are what matter. Junior's pursuit of history didn't depend on the good fortunes of his team or a pitifully small sample of games in October. The next year, he'd get a full season and a fair shot to hit 62 home runs. And he chased the record again.
Are you serious? Back to back?
Unlike the previous year, Junior avoided that July slump. On August 1st, he was still on pace to hit 62 by year's end, and he never fell far off that pace. What happened next, I never saw coming. It stopped mattering.
Jesus.
Over in the National League, Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa eclipsed him in August
Jesus.
and never looked back. It was their story now. Junior once again finished with 56 home runs. No other player in the history of baseball, not even Babe Ruth, had done that twice in a row.
See, that's the thing. Maybe this individual season, those guys were just better in that area. But the fact that he's doing this on a consistent basis, getting 56 home runs back to back seasons. I mean, you hear the names. Babe Ruth hasn't even done that. That's when you realise how ridiculous this really is to keep that consistency. That's nuts, man. That's actually
But we
nuts.
just didn't care. He wasn't alone. An old friend of his was being ignored as well. In many ways, Barry Bonds and Ken Griffey Jr. were reflections of one another.
So they're
Both
brothers,
were
yeah,
sons of
friends,
star
yeah.
baseball players, had a reputation for getting cranky from time to time, and were transcendently great in all facets of the game. Up until this point, Bonds and Griffey were the 90s. They were numbers 1 and 2 on the 1990s home run leaderboard. And unlike so many of their neighbors on this list, they were great at everything. Both complemented their power at the plate with base stealing ability few others possessed, with Junior stealing more than 100 bases in this time, and Bonds 300. While other power hitters tended to be kind of bad in the field, both these men stood out as excellent outfielders, with Bonds winning 7 Gold Gloves, and Junior 8. In '98, which was only his age 33 season, Bonds joined the 400-400 club, 400 home runs, 400 stolen bases. To this day, he's the only player ever to do it across their entire careers, regardless of age. Incredibly, the only player ever to come close to matching this feat was his father, Bobby.
Oh,
And while
shit!
some
So what I'm noticing here, like, I read that as Barry Bonds as well. What I'm noticing now then, like Ken Griffey and Ken Griffey Jr., a lot of these players, like, it revolves through family. Like, you don't get this in many, like, you get the occasion where, like, athletes, like, fathers and, like, sons sort of, like, have their sort of history in the NBA. And, like, you'll see that rarely, but I'm seeing this in baseball quite a lot. And I mean, Bobby Bonds and Barry Bonds, to both be this level of players and your family, like, this is your dad and this is your son, that's nuts. Like, that is ridiculous.
in baseball recognized the magnitude of this accomplishment, America generally didn't care or even notice. It's
Wow.
comical to look back on how little we acknowledge something that was plainly obvious to everyone on Earth. In '98, Bonds looked basically the same as he did at the start of the decade.
God damn.
The same could be said of Junior. Mark McGwire, on the other hand, had transformed from a normal-looking guy into a cartoonish Soviet artillery prototype that took 3 days to reposition and 25 men to operate. His eventual admission? that he loaded up on steroids to
Okay.
smash the record with 70 home runs, wasn't necessary. Back in 1987, when Griffey was a lonely 17-year-old toiling away in the obscurity of the
This is making
Arizona
me sad.
Instructional League, Bonds, then in his second Major League season, would take him out to dinner. The two have been close ever since. One night after the 98 season, Bonds had dinner at Griffey's home. In his book about Bonds, sports writer Jeff Pearlman describes a conversation between the two that evening. As the story goes, Bonds finally let it all out. He was sick of playing it straight. He'd played clean for a decade and accomplished incredible things, only to become a footnote, watching as others juiced up largely without scrutiny and were lauded as the saviors of baseball. He was going to get his too, he decided. Griffey, for the record, says this conversation never happened. Whether or not it did, it at least did accurately represent a fork in the road he certainly faced around this time. And the general consensus is that he never used any performance-enhancing drugs. I have kids, he later said. I don't want them to think their dad's a cheater.
Fair play, man. Especially in that era. I don't know what the actual sort of thought of like the general consensus from baseball fans is, but if he never did that and he had these records, respect to Griffey, man, because that is to still be like at this level when other players around you are doing steroids and like they've got all these sort of advantages that they shouldn't really have, and he's still there doing these like insane things. That's when you realise he's an absolute great. But again, I don't know what the general consensus of if he did it or not, because again, I don't really know the sort of the background story to this. Like in terms
Cheating
of
in
how
sports
fans
is
look at
cool.
it.
It's more than that, it's beautiful. It's no fun when your team's on the wrong end of it, but generally, getting mad about cheating is like walking out of the movie theater because you disapprove of the actions of Darth Vader. Sports allow humanity to be what it is, warts and all, at its most base or brilliant, without any real consequence. The rules are not laws, they're
More
dares.
rules.
When we orchestrate elaborate sign-stealing operations, we express our ingenuity. And when our dumb schemes blow up in our faces, we give the world something to laugh about. When, for example,
true.
we throw an illegal spitball for decades, literally write a book called Me and the Spitter, and end up in the Hall of Fame anyway after everyone has
It's
a giggle
true.
about it, we demonstrate how little any of this actually
Yeah,
matters,
man.
and how arbitrary our standards are. Bonds allegedly cheated for years, looking like Super Shredder in front of the entire world, taking down baseball's most hallowed records.
Look at his arms.
And the powers that be couldn't do anything about it. It's high comedy. But if cheating is valid, practicing virtue is every bit as valid. Did Junior ever use PEDs? No one can know for certain aside
Okay.
from YouTube commenters. They're all medical doctors who are very well connected in the baseball world, and they're bound to know if you ask them.
For God's
Again, the
sake.
general consensus is that he did not use PEDs.
Okay.
I choose to agree with this consensus, and I celebrate it. Not because he was doing the right thing, because who cares about that? Because he did what he wanted to do. He turned down the opportunity to graduate from a baseball superhero to a baseball god. Instead, choosing the opportunity to remain himself. Besides, it wasn't as though Junior's production was the problem.
Oh, another poor season from the team.
Randy Johnson had spent years pitching his guts out for this team. If it weren't for him leaving every bit of himself on the field in '95, the succession of miracles that kept the Mariners in Seattle probably wouldn't have occurred. After the intense workload sent him to the disabled list in '96, he'd returned in '97 with his best season yet. But the Mariners, tasked with keeping all four of the Beatles on the payroll at the same time, wouldn't, and maybe in a sense couldn't, offer him a contract extension. Randy spent the final season of his contract feeling completely disrespected, and the bad energy seemed to radiate throughout the clubhouse.
Okay.
The thing to do was trade him. At one point, the Dodgers offered a package that included the legendary Wilton Guerrero. The season prior, Guerrero had used a corked bat. He was caught when the bat shattered on an infield grounder and sent the cork flying. He was really caught when he ran around trying to collect the evidence instead of running to first. He would have made the perfect Mariner, but the team announced Randy was off the market. Things took a turn for the worse after a clubhouse shoving match with David Segui in July. Randy's numbers were awful by his standards, and the Mariners were all but out of the playoff hunt. Right before the deadline, they shipped him to Houston out of desperation. The knock on Johnson had been the 1996 injury and concerns about his future health. A mediocre 1998 suggested that his best pitching might have been behind him. But, as though morale had been the problem all along, Johnson caught fire the second he left town, finishing with an unreal 1.28 ERA in Houston and helping lead the Astros to the playoffs. Randy Johnson would end up pitching until past his 46th birthday.
He played until he was 46? Wait, what? What year would that have been then? That is absurd.
Along the way, winning a World Series MVP award and 4 more Cy Young awards in 4 consecutive years. As soon as he was eligible, he was nearly unanimously voted into the Hall of Fame. The loss was catastrophic for the Mariners, who had never lacked for hitting, but relied on Randy to keep their pitching from scuttling the team entirely. In both their playoff seasons, their ERA was far worse without him on the mound. What could this team do without Randy Johnson? In 1998, we had our answer. Here we see the Kingdome, just about a week before the Mariners' opening day. And you know what? It's not so bad. It's only 23 years old. No tiles have fallen since the 1994 incident, more than 5 years ago. And it offers the ideal controlled environment for Junior, who has a real shot at breaking the all-time home run record one day. The permanently closed roof ensures that the wind won't blow his home run balls back into play. The field dimensions aren't all that unfriendly to him either. All in all, the Kingdome seems like the perfect place for Junior to make history and establish himself as the all-time... No, shit.
I'm not trying to satisfy, you know.
No, crab apples.
Oh, it's next to it as well. Oh my god.
From Griffey's 1989 debut until that ballpark swan song on June 27th, 1999, Griffey had hit 377 career home runs, 198 of which came at the Kingdome. And whereas about 50.4% of all MLB homers came at home during that time, Griffey's 198 constituted about 52.5% of his career total. An uptick over the average big leaguer that's nothing to sneeze at. But their subsequent move into Safeco Field, their new $500 million home following the '99 All-Star break, meant trading a closed, controlled environment for one that was exposed to the whims of the Seattle elements, which would cost about 10 to 15 feet worth of carry off a hitter's bat. On top of that, Safeco's right field fence was about 15 feet further back than that of the Kingdome. Griffey was
crazy how these things can make such a big difference.
Not a fan of the new park or the dimensions of a stadium ironically dubbed the house that Griffey built. So despite Junior's heroics keeping the team in Seattle and getting said house built, in true Mariners fashion, its architect didn't even stick around for its first full season. In the wake of his neighbor and golfer Payne Stewart's tragic death, Griffey realized he wanted to be closer to home and his family. Having rejected a $140 million extension, about a month after the conclusion of the 1999 season, he met with team management seeking a one-way ticket out of town, eventually settling on his native Cincinnati as the destination of choice to continue his career.
Jeez.
Just like that, the man who brought Seattle baseball back from the dead, who revitalized an entire fan base, and whose sheer will and refusal to lose got a new stadium built to keep the Mariners in town, was gone, leaving the entire organization reeling and uncertain as to what.
So no Randy Johnson and no Ken Griffey now. God damn. This is an insane... I've said it so many times, but I'm really...
As a testament to how short of a time the Kingdome lasted,
back to the 70s.
The Mariners plan to bring in Diego Segui, who threw the first pitch in Kingdome history back in 1977, to also throw the last pitch in Kingdome history. His son David was on the Mariners roster. It would have been a beautiful moment, but the team messed up and somehow failed to pay for his plane ticket, so he turned around and went home. It was enough to make you wonder whether this team could do anything right. Seattle had a ballpark. It was burned down by a serial arsonist, so they found another one, but it was full of mud. So they built another one, but there was poop everywhere. So they built another one, but the sky literally fell. So they built another one. But for reasons that still confound us, they decided on field dimensions that were inhospitable toward the face of their franchise.
Damn.
A factor that fed into his decision to leave town. The Kingdom finale wasn't the final game of the season, but for everyone who had spent all decade marveling at this team, it showed us everything they, and we, were about to lose. In the fourth inning, Griffey dug his cleat into the center field wall to rob Juan Gonzalez of a 3-run homer and preserve the lead. A lead he'd created in the first place with a 3-run homer of his own.
God damn.
It was the most beautiful swing in baseball. It's the
That is
one we
lovely,
always
isn't it?
emulated as kids. That's what was going away.
So picturesque.
An unreal player sending the ball into a concrete sky, watching over rolls and rolls of manufactured grass. There was something saccharine about all of it. Even the story of saving the local baseball team that was ripped straight out of a stupid movie. Of course, in reality, the team had been far more than just him, but to those of us who had marveled at this team all decade, they seem now like an empty coat.
Where's at the end?
But this is Junior we're talking about. Before him, the Mariners produced nothing but static. From the day he arrived all the way up to the present day, this team has had meaning. Everything that has happened in the 21st century, no matter how chaotic or bizarre, has made a certain amount of sense. And though no one knew it at the time, Junior had left the Seattle Mariners one last parting gift.
Okay.
The footage we're about to see was forgotten for years and years. It's sort of a miracle that this moment is preserved on film at all. No one could have imagined the significance we would one day find in it. It's 1995 in Cincinnati. Junior's gone out to dinner with a camera crew in tow because he's meeting a special guest midway through his tour of America. Junior has even brought along Senior, as well as his son, Trey.
Okay.
You most recently saw him with the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Bloody hell. How talented is your family? I can't get over this, man. This family, the genetics in this family are next level. What the fuck?
The player we're about to meet is a 22-year-old who is already extraordinarily talented. Although it'll be another 5 years before he plays his first Major League Baseball game, Junior presents him with his very own number 24 jersey. The young man's in awe.
Oh, what's his name? I know this is going to be Ikaira. You know what I'm trying to say. I know who this is going to be.
Like all young players,
I remember seeing him in like a title. Like I was looking through the episode, like the titles, and I saw a title involving his name. And I've seen obviously in the video I did in the past and like the timeline of this team's history, and he was a massive part. So what a guy to sort of take on the Ken Griffey role.
everywhere, he idolizes Griffey. And in fact, not long after this visit, he'll begin to express a profound desire to play on the Mariners one day. This meeting is likely the moment his journey to Seattle began. I think you might know his name too.
That is so sick. I'm getting goosebumps, you know. This is actually incredible. Bro, I'm getting a little bit teary. What the fuck? Fuck me, that was insane. I didn't even want it to end. That ending was elite. Oh my days. I don't know what kind of awards they give YouTube documentaries about sport, but that sports that are mostly just charts about. But this series should win all of them. Bro, this is incredible. That ending was... I felt that, man. I've got to get to the next episode already. The age... This is it. The age of Ikairo. Man, that ending... I'm going to have to rewatch that at my own time, you know? That was sick. You forgot the most important Randy Johnson stat. Disintegrated bird. Is that him who did it? Randy Johnson? That video of the bird getting absolutely smashed to pieces. How insane it is when the David Ortiz revelation isn't even the reveal. Everyone comes away thinking about that. Man, I can't... That ending was incredible. I mean, this whole thing was nuts, but that ending, I felt that, man. I was getting goosebumps. I couldn't really help that. Man. I never got chills from only seeing a player's arm before. Stay aside Netflix and Tiger King. Tiger King, what a series. The best documentaries of 2020 is actually on YouTube. It's for sure, man. The beauty of YouTube, and it's all free as well. How wild is it that this stuff is all free to watch? I can't imagine the work that they put into this, and this is just free, man. Oh my god. Who else was just dead shocked when they heard the part about David Ortiz? Imagine if all the stars had aligned and the Mariners had this as their lineup: Cairo, A-Rod, Junior, Edgar, David Ortiz and Jay Root. Mo, imagine that team, that link up. Oh my days. I can't be the only one who spat that ball out when the David Ortiz fought. Did Junior ever use PEDs? No one can know for certain aside for YouTube commenters. They're all medical doctors and are bound to know if you ask them. That's exactly why I asked as well, for fuck's sake. But I love this, man. This is an incredible series. I want to thank you guys so much for getting me into this. Like, now I realise, like, why did I spend so long not doing this? This series is just, it's incredible. It's so good. Man, I still can't get over that ending. That was something else, man. I really just sort of got felt up with like emotions and stuff, like how sort of like Griffey Jr. was sort of passing on the baton to the next guy who's the start of the new generation for the team in Cairo. And man, we're going to see this in the next episode. It will be in the next few days for sure. Like, it's not going to be a long wait like last time, man, because oh my god, I'm just repeating myself at this point. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this from Secret Base. I keep saying SB Nation, Secret Base now. We've got to remember them as Secret Base. And yeah, hopefully you guys enjoy it. Until next time, like, subscribe.